Hi, everyone, and welcome back to NCBA's Coffee Break. I'm your host, Nathan Willner, and I'm really glad you're taking a few minutes with us today. We're continuing our conversation around innovation and practical strategies for legal organizations. And today we're focusing on a topic that's top of mind for many law firms getting started with digital. I'm excited to be joined by Seth Peters, a senior executive from TrueML. Seth works closely with organizations navigating digital transformation, especially in highly regulated and relationship-driven industries like legal and legal debt collection. Seth, thanks so much for being here. It is great to have you on our podcast.
Nathan, thanks for having me in today. And look, it's great to be here and super excited for our conversation.
All right, well, so let's start with the big picture. For law firms that are still early in their digital journey, how has the landscape changed, and why is now the right time to get started?
Man, has it changed, Nathan. I look back in 5 years and I'm like, it feels like a decade plus of innovation and developments has happened and been crammed into the last five. But so a lot has changed. 5 years ago it was who's going to send an email. Today it's well, how is an email fitting in or a text fitting into the way we self-service and drive that within our operations and the way that everything's done in the cloud versus on-prem as it once was. But why now? Well, for one, the biggest thing that kept the first firms from using email, text, and digital communication strategy was, let's face it, no one wanted to be the guinea pig. And the great thing is, as that time has come and gone, and anybody starting that journey today doesn't have to worry about that. The foundation has continued to have compounding developments built on top of it. And it really has paved the way from those early adopters for any firm out there today to start their digital communications journey with a lot of confidence and learnings from others who made those missteps in the past, trying to be the first in the early innovators.
And so, what risks do law firms face if they just continue to delay further on taking this, moving into this space?
Yeah, look, a lot, right? I mean, you could be a little bit slower to the game, 3 to 4 years ago, Nathan, but today you're falling behind every month that you choose not to do it. I mean, let's keep it simple, right? A lot of the firms out there have competing markets that they look for placements from clients in, losing market share, right? That's the first one. At the end of the day, if you're up against one of your peers that can operate faster and is a higher performer, they're going to get more market share, and that has a detriment to your business and the bottom line. Human capital inefficiency, right? Like everything around these firms is going more digital, and if you continue to dig in, the way you process, the way that you run your operations is going to have some issues, and some of those issues could even be compliance related issues for the way you're processing files in and out of your inventory. And then like even the client perception and reputation, right? Like, I mean, Nathan, we know this is a relationship industry. And you and I, you could be my client for 30 years, but at some point, if everybody around me is doing things a certain way and I'm not, some of that reputation and just damage potentially to a great relationship could happen as to why is the firm not adopting when everybody else is?
No, Seth, absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense to me. But let's make this like a practical conversation. So if a law
Yeah.
firm is truly starting from scratch, no
Yeah.
formal digital strategy yet, what is the smartest first step in building a digital communication platform approach?
The golden question that every firm has asked in the 4+ years that we've been having this conversation. Now, I think there's something in mind, but before we get there, I think it's really important to first, like, put your clients in two buckets. My clients that allow me to do digital communications, which by the way, they're probably the ones that are always asking you what you're doing, why you aren't doing it when you're at some of the conferences or you're meeting with them, versus the ones who hey, like it's not an option today. I think that's one place to really start. And then at that point, it's assessing, hey, within my servicing operations, where do I have the biggest pain points when it comes to I don't have enough human capital to be able to service. I wish I could migrate more of my human capital to other parts and finding those gaps that digital communication strategy could close. And I think when it comes to specific use case, every firm could do this today. And this is actually a great place to start because you're going to do the least amount of risk when it comes to using emails or text communications. You've always had an account that has paid you at some point, and at some point that account probably stopped paying you. But there was a level of engagement. They made a commitment to your firm, And that's the best place to start because from a compliance perspective, you probably already have direct consent to send email communication to them. You're covered up. You already have all the information you need and you don't have to look anywhere else. And I'll tell you, I was talking to one of my newest partners, Nathan, we've been talking for over 3 years. And finally, Nathan, they were like, okay, Seth, we're just gonna do this. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna start it. And they actually did what I just walked through. I call them broken payers, folks that made an arrangement, they didn't pay. And in less than 2 weeks of launching that, they were able to get 40%, nearly 40% of those payers back into an arrangement and a plan. And then it's instant win, instant impact, and it's ultimately fuel for the next part of that journey in your digital communication strategy.
Yeah, that's amazing. I would also suggest it's also a win for the consumers because folks that fell off their payment arrangement, if there's no easy way to contact those folks, ultimately more litigation is going to happen or other bad things are going to happen to that consumer. So it's a win-win-win. I mean, everybody is happier and happier consumers are less have to complain about anything. So I think it's a tremendous thing. So most firms don't, have unlimited resources, and even the larger law firms in the space aren't that large when you talk about, large companies. Um, so when budgets and staff are tight, where should a law firm first focus to drive the biggest performance impact? Now, you may have already given that answer because that was a good answer, but in other words, there's only so much money. Should someone
Yeah.
who's listening today think like, oh, I just can't afford to do this?
Yeah, no, it's a great thought, right? And I think yes, I gave like an application, but I think let's look at it even differently because again, back to the buckets, there's a how do I create more efficiencies and more productivity with the limited resources I have today, Nathan? But then to get there, sometimes a faster path is actually cutting costs where it could be a revenue creator to invest into other parts of the servicing operation. So look, it should be plastered all over the walls, just like yeah, it is at Notre Dame football. When you go out and you play like a champion today, it should be stop sending letters to consumers, and it should be in every firm. Because look, the cost is not going to slow down for a stamp, and then add that into labor costs to fulfill the workflow. It's not going to slow down anytime soon. It's going to be through at least the early 2030s. So if you know that cost is continuing to go up, you have to stop the bleeding somehow. So being able to identify where am I sending a letter? You have to send a letter to every one of these consumers today when you ingest that account from your client. Take a portion of that in your total inventory, start with email, and then start to scale from there. That's the easiest way for you to get money back in your operation to then either make an investment into more human capital or other technologies that can say, hey, all of my limited resources from a staffing standpoint, or by the way, Nathan, turnover, which no matter what industry you're in, or no one is protected from it. And you want to start then building into how can I be most efficient with the team I have today and then be protected when that turnover inevitably does happen down the road. And I think starting with cutting costs is the fastest way to fix the other part of the problem, which human capital, limitations and restrictions and just overall budget, to invest where you want to.
Yeah, and it like hurts my ears when you use the word stamp and envelopes and mail and paper. But the truth is, uh, I think that there were a moment in time where nobody would have imagined that people will not have a phone line in their house, right? That I mean, it just seemed like crazy. And I think we're at that same juncture where slowly there will be no more mail coming to people's homes. I don't know, we're not there yet, but it's going to be just like the cell phone situation. It took many years, but no one has a home line, phone line in their home anymore. There's not going to be any mail. This is going, you're just, pushing off the inevitable, quite frankly, because this is how people communicate. So with that in mind, one of the biggest hurdles we hear about is getting internal buy-in from law firms and lawyers. How can law firms effectively make the case for investing in digital, both internally with leadership and externally with clients?
Well, this might be my favorite topic of conversation. Maybe because I have to do it every day with my boss, both on professional and then my boss on the home front. So I'm very used to having to make the business case to get to the things that, I want. No, but in all seriousness, if you remember back to the earlier conversation where I mentioned firms got to start to create two buckets for their clients, the ones that I can and the ones that I cannot too, right? And ultimately, you got to use the ones where you can to get to the ones that are no for now or not today, right? Um, Starting there is always the best place to start. And then I think, in my experience, compliance and cost are the two blockers or reasons why I wouldn't do something like digital communications today historically, with compliance heavily outweighing the costs when you compare the two, rightfully so for the industry that we're in. But I think it's almost some reverse engineering, if you will, Nathan. So it's like, okay, I have this North Star, which is also important. You got to know where you're going. What is the goal at the end of the day for the firm and working backwards? And if you want to have this super scaled up digital communication strategy as your North Star, here we are today. And you got to be honest with yourself. And so when you talk and pitch internally to leadership, it's like, hey, here are the clients. We know we have their blessing and support. That's half the battle. Second battle is if we want to get this off the ground, Nathan, this is all the things that we have to manage and do from a daily standpoint. Every message that goes out, everything we need to store, everything we need to have a QA and QC process for. When you start to vocalize all those things, you're planting the seed with internal management that like, we can't we can't do that. Like we just don't. We don't have same thing. We don't have the financial resources. We don't have the human capital resources to be able to manage it. And that's where you set the stage for you're right, but we do have partners and vendors in the space that we can leverage to get that expertise in house and for us to get to that ultimate North Star that we're all chasing. So you kind of got to make your own firm feel the pain of, yeah, there's no way we can do this out of the gate. And then let that set the stage for here's now how you go and find the right partner that can give you that compliance expertise, but also the highly functioning servicing at scale, which again is where everybody's going to go, regardless of where you start out of the chute.
So that's, maybe how you get them, the company to buy into doing it. But how do you move the conversation from cost to value? Because, owners always think about like how much money is this costing me? They rarely ask the second question of what's the value to this?
Yeah, no, it's 100, and rightfully so, right? They got to sign the check, and it comes out of the bottom line that they're protecting. And I always try to find a real life example. So look at it as a financial planner, right? If you or I were going to talk to a financial planner, Nathan, they're going to say, there's an aggressive strategy and there's a conservative strategy. And at the end of the day, it depends on the goal again, your North Star, where you want to go. And then that kind of dictates what strategy and then what happens in the middle there. But the other side, the financial expert and advisor is going to say, you can't make zero investment to get the outcomes that you want either, right? So I think cost is just part of getting your business to modern day operations. There's going to be a cost. That cost could be externally with a vendor and a partner. That cost could be internally because you're exhausting resources you already don't have. I think value is what can I get today that's going to give me an immediate win? Goes back to that use case we talked about earlier where, hey, we got 40% of these accounts paying us again. That's an immediate win that we got. So there's some value back to your cost. Value is going to change and evolve the longer that you continue to change and develop your digital communication strategy. The value that a firm needs to get from day one, the first time they send a digital communication out the door, Nathan, from a year later when they're really doing it, doing it at scale is going to be completely different, right? There's a lot more nuance when you're a year later. Then you've got the data to be able to make an informed business decision of, hey, we're doing it in all these places. This is the best bang for our buck for what matters most to our bottom line and the clients that are most key and important to us. So I think that's an evolving conversation. And again, the cost, the day one's going to be different from the costs a year later, but so is the value part of that conversation. But if you don't have skin in the game, you're never going to get to the outcomes that you're chasing.
Yeah, and Seth, that's a great point because that first of all, that percentage is really impressive. I didn't know that. So that you were able to get that percentage of the defaulted payment arrangements, revived. But the value also will be that you might get clients that you didn't have before. So like that's the expanded value is that now
Absolutely.
you're going to be on par with other firms that are using this technology that you may have been behind the times. And uh, so it's not never too late to catch up, is what you're saying, right? Um,
That's it, Nathan. That's it.
so anyway, we're getting close to the end of our cup of coffee, so to speak. And finally, let's talk reality. So for law firms with limited resources, what advice would you give as they get started? But And we kind of covered that, but what mistakes are you seeing firms make early on?
Yeah, so I'd tell you, I think the biggest mistake that I see from firms is when I look back at the first conversations I was having with firms, some of what made me so excited. It was like a kid in a candy store. There's so many opportunities. We could go here, and we could do it all. And then you quickly realize biting off more than you can chew is usually not the best outcome, and you don't get to the success you hope for both sides. So I think the biggest pitfall that I see from firms out there today is they feel like they can do it themselves and they want to keep everything in house and a lot of it for compliance reasons. And they scale way too fast. And the problem with that is if you're starting with a handful of, hey, we're going to cut letters and we're going to send email receipts for anybody that made a payment, or the notice letters that we're going to send 5 days before a payment's due, we're going to send that via email or text. Great place to start. The problem is a lot of firms that have these big lofty dreams, they want to go wide and deep out of the chute. And when you're not a digital communications expert, especially as a debt collector in that type of use case, there's so many unknowns you just would have never even thought about. Quite frankly, Nathan, I didn't even know existed until I stepped into this role years and years ago, right? Your spam rate, your IP reputation. And what happens is you get a lot of these firms out there that had these big dreams. They started big and early, got the immediate pop out of the gate. Wow, why didn't we do this sooner? And then they start looking month over month and like, wow, it's not as good as that first month. Why do we continue to get less performance when we feed it more? And you've ultimately set yourself up for failure because then you say, well, digital didn't work for me. It worked that 1 month and then it never worked again because you didn't know all the things in the middle and that really make a digital communication strategy perform to max capacity, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is if you're going to start small or if you're going to start internally, start small. Start with the things that you already have connectivity to the consumer for. Start saving money on 5 day out notices, your receipt type of letters and confirmation letters. That's an easy place to start. If you are going to proactively send communications to accounts that you're getting from clients, whether it's before suit, whether it's in the middle before judgment, or 5 years dormant judgment, try to find a partner because, again, there's just so much of an expertise that you have to be able to get into the inbox consistently.
Seth, this has been incredibly insightful, and we haven't even touched on how AI is going to
Oh,
weaves into this. So that's going to be for another. That's a much bigger cup of coffee, which we don't have time for today. But hopefully, you'll come back and we'll talk about how what you're doing can be amplified by use of AI, and again, why you need to have a responsible partner in that kind of work. So anyway, it's been really practical, the insights you've given, especially for law firms of all different sizes at all different stages in the debt collection process, especially for those getting started. So thanks for joining us today. So what's your final closing statement you want to give our listeners?
yeah, no, well, first, Nathan, thank you. And anytime we can have another cup of Joe whenever the timing makes sense and the topic of conversation is something I can support. But for everybody out there, and this is a message I tell anybody I talk to, whether you're a small boutique firm and you have maybe one state or two states that you service, you're a national service or you're in between, there's an opportunity that digital communications can absolutely bolster your operations, create efficiencies, and ultimately don't lose sight of what the business is that we're in. We're in debt collections industry. If you're looking for more payments and getting more payments can fuel the bottom line growth that you're looking for, this is a great conversation to start and would love to be a part of your journey. And even if it's not a good fit, advise you to other solutions out there that are a better fit for what ultimately your firm needs from your partner that you want to work with.
All right, Seth, you got the final word, and that is great advice. And hopefully, our listeners will uh, take advantage of the direction you're pointing them in. So, thank you to everyone who joined us for this NCBA coffee break. If you found this helpful, be sure to check out our upcoming sessions. Until next time, I'm Nathan Willner, and thanks for spending your coffee break with us. Stay engaged, and most importantly, stay caffeinated. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.